The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
A proposed new law that could restrict key benefits for Bitcoin miners in Texas passed a key hurdle yesterday. Joining us now to discuss is CoinDesk regulatory reporter Amitoj Singh. Welcome back, Amitoj.
Thanks for having me, folks. Good to see your faces.
Good to see you as well. So what happened deep in the heart of Texas yesterday?
Well, yesterday, this bill called Senate Bill 1751, which is basically all about capping how much miners can participate in grid balancing programs, it passed the Texas State Senate Committee. This happened yesterday. But just to explain what we're talking about when we talk about grid balancing programs, they're when miners answer the call for controlling loads to just balance the electricity grid, and voluntarily they curtail power use. And Texas miners have actually been doing this. They've been shutting down their operations at times of high energy demand in return for credits that they can use later. And some of them got many credits. And now, because not a single member of the committee actually voted against the bill of the legislation, this particular bill, it gains entry into something known as an uncontested list of bills, which also means that it has a 95% chance of winning Senate approval, and from there it will move on in the process to the Texas House.
All right, and right now Texas is one of the world's largest hubs for the energy-intensive Bitcoin mining industry, largely due to low electricity prices and a favorable business environment, but the tide is turning now. Why?
Well, there are basically two factors for that. The tide started to turn for the industry around the summer of 2022 when the crypto contagion had kind of taken off, as the Texas grid operator then slowed approvals for new facilities due to an influx of miners. And remember, back then, of mining companies that were just trying to think about coming to Texas had processes in place. And then the state's grid operator, known as the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or the acronym ERCOT, they slowed the issuance of new permits for miners to connect to the grid. Now, ERCOT is trying to balance the state's demand and supply of electricity. But what this has done is that the pipeline of readily available electricity in Texas was already running dry, and Bitcoin miners were already finding it difficult to kind of build out, energy infrastructure. So they've started to do that themselves. And, they're literally with generators and power lines, making that happen themselves for their machines to be plugged into. And that build out has also slowed down the process of just setting up operations. And the second reason that we can really chalk it up to macro factors, obviously global economic factors, but also crypto miners have been struggling as the price of Bitcoin had slumped, and this reduced their profits, and it also forced some of them to sell their minted tokens to cover operating costs.
Anything else in the bill, Amitoj, worth noting?
Yeah, there's something that's quite interesting. This new legislation will basically, what does it do, right? What does the legislation say? It'll cap miners' participation to 10% of the total participation. And the bill will also take away tax abatements for certain miners, certain property, and basically require miners with more than 10 megawatts of computing power to register as large flexible load operators.
Amitoj, while we have you here, kind of want to ask a different question, because you've done such great coverage of the Indian market. And, there's been so many headlines recently about the U.S. cracking down and all these crypto companies leaving the U.S. I'm just curious, does this affect India crypto at all? Where does India fit into the story? Because we're hearing a lot about Europe and East Asia. I'm just curious, maybe it's not a thing, but I'm just wondering if you're hearing anything.
That's funny you asked this question. I was in Mumbai last week meeting some, let's say important sources. And what they did say was that what's happening in the US is happening, but it doesn't really affect us. And that's obviously coming from authorities, right? When you talk about industry's already been, let's say, stifled at the very least, because since February 1st last year, when the new tax was announced, the 30% tax on profits, and then another 1% tax deducted at source for every single transaction that you make while trading, these two big taxes affected the industry for the last 1 year. Couple that with the contagion, couple that with generally a bit of a shift away from encouraging anything to do with crypto really, and shifting all of that marketing towards CBDC. So that's what India has been doing. So if you talk about regulation by enforcement, India was way ahead of the US and the US is basically playing catch up right now. And what we see happening next is that the industry, and I was at an event the other day where for the first time, and we wrote an article about this, for the first time you saw several prominent politicians actually show up, be a part of a crypto stage, an event hosted by effectively currently the most prominent crypto exchange in India. And that was an event where they said one thing, which was that if you want to talk about Web3, then you got to come out of the cloak of crypto. And that's what's basically happening in India. They don't want to associate Web3 blockchain with crypto. And they're asking the industry to find their own way to do that rather than regulate the industry to do that.
Interesting. Mirrors a lot of what our first guest from Citibank was saying. Amitoj, thank you so much. That was CoinDesk regulatory reporter Amitoj Singh.